Ahead of tomorrow's King's Speech, of course, he'll be setting out all sorts of legislation and bills in terms of the government's agenda. But Labour is under pressure from some of its own backbench MPs to scrap the two-child benefits cap. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner was asked about it on Breakfast. Let's have a listen to part of her interview.
Well, I accept that people are frustrated and want to, change a lot of things that the Conservatives have done over the last 14 years, but our inheritance is dire. As someone who grew up in poverty, I am not prepared to leave office, after a Labour government where we haven't made those significant changes, and child poverty is an issue for us, and we're absolutely appalled that children haven't got beds to sleep in at night. This is the 21st century. This shouldn't be the situation we're in, but this is the inheritance that the Conservatives have left us, and we will continue to tackle those issues.
Preet, is that really good enough in terms of not scrapping the two-child benefits cap?
Look, no one policy is going to lift children out of poverty.
That one does actually lift quite a few out of poverty, according to all sorts of think tanks.
OK, but, we've got a Child Health Action Plan where we're talking about making sure we've got Breakfast Club investment, because we know having a, good start to the day is really, really important. Children not having hungry bellies, for example. And our offer in terms of childcare, making sure that more people can go back into work so they can have more money in their pockets, and making sure that childcare is affordable.
So you think it's right
important.
to keep it?
I think it's right that when the economy grows that we absolutely review it, because I'm not going to make an unfunded commitment today. The British public would not expect me to sit here and say, yes, we're going to deliver it, without me telling you how we're going to pay for it.
Right, well, why did you then, in February 2020, you were one of 78 Labour MPs who signed a letter calling on the then Prime Minister and Chancellor to, among other things, end the two-child limit in universal credit?
Well, absolutely, but look, the economic situation is much more difficult now. What we've inherited, given the Conservatives, I mean, goodness me, we will not make any commitment on any policy without saying how we actually are going to pay for it. Now, look, there are 20% of children in my constituency that live in poverty. Closing down children's centres, decimation of early years services, places where actually they could get support, advice, all of that has been stripped away. Local government funding cuts to charities. Sure. This all has an impact.
Right, and you obviously thought it was affordable then, but yes, that was 2020. It's very much the Conservatives who have come to this situation with all the litany of woes that have just been listed by Preet. Do you agree?
Well, I'm trying to think if this is what it is. We'll see lots of these over the next promises that were made over 14 years that suddenly actually become quite difficult to deliver. I would argue there's an opportunity
because of mismanagement by you?
No, not at all. No, different choices. So, for example, in 2021, we decided to change the UC taper rate and uplift it from £500 and change the UC taper from 63% to 55%. And that cost £2 billion. But actually, that gave more working people £1,000 a year better. I, for one, think that's a better way of using the £2 to £3 billion that the child benefit cap puts in place. These are options that are going to be tested. A Keir's going to have a real tough time if these come to the surface, because you will see them time and time again. People re-quoted stuff they've said, promises they've made that they'll want to see that then don't come through.
You've had 14 years. Yeah. We've had 14
Absolutely.
years.
I've just given you a cast-iron example.
You would like to see it scrapped, wouldn't you?
I would. The two-child benefit cap is a cruel and unnecessary policy that affects 1.6 million children in this country. Lifting it isn't even that expensive. It's the same order of magnitude as the cost of the fuel duty freeze. And I know where I would rather spend my money, lifting 250,000 children out of poverty. That's a choice the Labour government could take. It's choosing not to.
Well, Conservative Home, the Conservatives should support a Labour revolt over the two-child limit. Join the Greens, join some Labour MPs and the SNP.
Yeah, my colleague William wrote that, and you can ask him for his reasons.
But you don't agree?
I don't think that the two-child limit should have been brought in. The reason that George Osborne managed to get away with it is because it felt, for many, fundamentally unfair that working households had to make really, really difficult decisions about whether or not they could afford a second child or a third child, and people on welfare who their taxes were paying for didn't have to face it. Now, the two-child limit was the wrong way to deal with that. I think that we should actually have far more support for people trying to have families in general. But at the moment, you will have to ask William for his views on that policy.